The great chamber floated in the darkness of space, a perfect sphere of crystal and metal that had witnessed 3,000 years of absolute peace. Inside, 12 beings sat around a table that glowed with soft blue light. Each represented a different species, but they all shared the same cold, emotionless expression. High Commander Vorthak raised one of his forearms. His skin was pale gray, almost white, and his large black eyes showed no feeling at all. When he spoke, his voice came from a device on his chest, translating his thoughts into words the others could understand. "We have detected new radio signals," he said. "They come from the third planet in a system at the edge of our territory. The signals show intelligence." The other council members turned their attention to the holographic display that appeared above the table. It showed a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. Data scrolled beside the image: atmospheric composition, gravity levels, population estimates. "Another primitive species," said General Kryn, his reptilian features showing slight annoyance. His red scales caught the chamber's light as he leaned forward. "How many does this make in the last century?" 17, replied Vorthak without emotion. "All successfully integrated into the hegemony. This species calls itself human, and their planet, Earth." The display changed to show various human transmissions. Music played from radio stations. Television broadcasts flickered with images of humans laughing, crying, fighting, creating art. News reports spoke of wars and peace treaties, scientific discoveries and artistic achievements. Counselor Zephys, whose blue tentacles swayed gently in the artificial atmosphere, made a sound like wind through leaves. "Their emotional responses are unusually strong," she observed. "Most species show some feeling, but these humans seem to experience everything very deeply." "Irrelevant," said Vorthak. "Strong emotions make integration more difficult at first, but once properly managed, they become compliant like all the others. The Council had perfected their system over millennia. First came peaceful contact. They would arrive with gifts and promises, offering technology and membership in their great galactic community. Most species were overwhelmed with joy at meeting advanced aliens. They welcomed the hegemony with open arms. Then came the slow process of integration. The aliens would study the new species, learning their weaknesses, mapping their defenses, understanding their culture. They offered more gifts: medical technology, clean energy, solutions to hunger and disease. In return, they asked for small things: a few bases here and there, the right to study the species more closely, permission to help organize their governments more efficiently. By the time any species realized what was happening, it was too late. Their militaries had been studied and infiltrated. Their governments had been reorganized under hegemony guidance. Their populations had grown dependent on alien technology. Resistance became impossible. Those who submitted completely were allowed to keep some semblance of their culture, though heavily modified to serve hegemony interests. Their brightest minds were taken to serve the greater good. Their resources became part of the collective whole. Their children learned hegemony values from birth. Those who resisted faced reduction protocols. Their numbers were cut to manageable levels through engineered disasters, diseases, or simple elimination. Survivors were relocated to work colonies where they could contribute without causing trouble. Within a generation or two, resistance was forgotten. "These humans show concerning technological advancement," reported Science Director Malthan, his insect-like body clicking as he spoke. "In just the past century, they have developed atomic weapons, space travel, and global communication networks." "How concerning?" asked General Kryn. "They have achieved in 100 years what typically takes species 500 to 1,000 years," Malthan replied. "Their rate of innovation is unprecedented in our database." "All the more reason to act quickly," said Vorthak. "Prepare the standard first contact protocol. Send Ambassador Quell with the usual gifts and promises. deploy Defense Platform Alpha to their system's edge, well beyond their detection capabilities. Ambassador Quell was a hegemony success story. His species, the Nareth, had been integrated 400 years ago. They had been artists and philosophers, creators of beautiful music and poetry that could move listeners to tears. Now Quell created propaganda for the hegemony. His artistic talents turned to more useful purposes. "What if they refuse integration?" asked Counselor Zephys. "No species has refused in over 800 years," Vorthak replied. "The benefits we offer are too great. The alternative we present is too terrible. They always choose integration." But as the council members reviewed the human transmissions, something felt different. The music was unlike anything in their databases, raw, passionate, defiant. The art showed not just beauty, but anger, rebellion, hope in the face of despair. The news reports spoke of humans who chose death over surrender, who fought impossible odds for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. "Their military conflicts are unusual," observed General Kryn, studying footage of human wars. "They continue fighting even when victory is impossible. They sacrifice themselves for others with no expectation of reward. Their tactical approaches are highly creative, sometimes illogical, but often effective." "Desperation," said Vorthak dismissively. "Primitive species often fight irrationally when they feel threatened. Once they understand the futility of resistance, they adapt." The chamber fell silent as the council members continued their analysis. Outside, the stars remained cold and distant, witnesses to 3 millennia of hegemony expansion. 12 species had learned to call this peace. Their cultures had been preserved in museums. Their histories had been edited for public consumption. Their children grew up grateful for hegemony protection and guidance. But deep in the archived files, older records told different stories. The Nareth had fought for 12 years before their final surrender. The Kryn themselves had been warriors once, before joining the hegemony voluntarily to avoid destruction. The Malthan had been scientists and explorers who dreamed of reaching distant galaxies. Now they all served the greater good. They maintained the peace. They expanded hegemony influence to new worlds and new species. They ensured that never again would the galaxy suffer the chaos of independent civilizations pursuing their own interests. "Transmission prepared," announced Communications Officer Venth, her crystalline body chiming softly. "Ambassador Quell's ship is ready for departure." "Excellent," said Vorthak. "Begin standard approach protocols. Maintain peaceful intentions. At all costs, let them see us as benevolent guides, not conquerors." The great chamber's occupants returned to their various duties, confident in their ancient system. They had done this before. They would do it again. One more primitive species would join their perfect union, adding their biological and technological distinctiveness to the collective whole. Earth would learn to love Big Brother, just as all the others had. But none of them noticed the small detail that Science Director Malthan had buried deep in his reports. In all their analysis of human conflicts, they had found no record of any human civilization ever surrendering completely. Cities fell, governments collapsed, armies were destroyed, but somewhere, somehow, humans always kept fighting. The hegemony was about to learn why their perfect peace had lasted 3,000 years. It was about to meet a species that had never learned how to quit. As Ambassador Quell's ship accelerated toward the small blue planet, the defense platforms moved into position around the solar system. Standard protocol demanded overwhelming force be available, just in case. No species had ever required its use, but the hegemony believed in being prepared. Earth continued its rotation, unaware that its greatest challenge was approaching from the stars. Humans went about their daily lives, fighting their small wars, and dreaming their impossible dreams, not knowing that their entire way of life hung in the balance. The first test was coming. The ship appeared on Earth's radar screens at exactly 0930 GMT on a Tuesday morning. It was massive, 3 kilometers long and shaped like a graceful teardrop. It made no aggressive moves, simply took position in orbit around the moon and began transmitting on multiple frequencies. "People of Earth," the message began in perfect English, then repeated in dozens of other languages. "We come in peace. We represent the Galactic Hegemony, a union of 12 species that has maintained harmony across the stars for 3,000 years. We wish to meet with your leaders and extend an invitation to join our great community." Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Pentagon, watching the feeds from observatories around the world. As Admiral of the Pacific Fleet, she had seen many threats in her 30-year career, but nothing like this. The ship's design was beautiful, almost artistic, but her military mind immediately began cataloging potential weapons systems. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Rodriguez, looking up from his console, "we're getting similar messages from radio telescopes in Australia, Chile, and Puerto Rico. The signal is coming from lunar orbit, confirmed by multiple sources." President Elena Vasquez entered the room, followed by her security detail and several advisors. She looked tired. It had been less than 6 hours since the first detection, and she hadn't slept since. "Status report," she said simply. "One alien vessel in lunar orbit," Admiral Chen replied. "No hostile actions detected. They're requesting a meeting with world leaders. The UN Security Council is in emergency session. So far, everyone's too shocked to make any real decisions." Dr. Marcus Webb, the government's chief xenobiologist, cleared his throat. He was a small, nervous man who usually worked with much smaller subjects than alien spaceships. "Madam President, this is the greatest moment in human history. We need to approach this carefully, but we can't let fear drive our decisions." The president nodded. "What do we know about their intentions?" "They claim to represent something called the Galactic Hegemony," Webb continued, consulting his tablet. 12 species, 3,000 years of peace. They're offering us membership in their community." "And you believe them?" asked Admiral Chen. "I want to," Webb admitted, "but I think we need to verify everything they tell us." Over the next 48 hours, the world changed forever. The alien ship, which called itself the Harmony's Voice, began broadcasting educational programs about the galactic hegemony. The transmissions showed beautiful worlds where different species lived together in perfect peace, cities that seemed to float in the clouds, technology that had eliminated poverty, disease, and war. Ambassador Quell himself was impressive when he finally appeared on the screens. He looked almost human, with pale skin and large, kind eyes. When he spoke, his voice was warm and reassuring. "Your species shows great potential," he told the assembled representatives of Earth's major nations. "You have created beautiful art, music that moves the soul, and scientific achievements that impress even our advanced civilization. But you also struggle with conflict, inequality, and suffering that we could help you eliminate." The demonstrations that followed left Earth's leaders speechless. Medical technology that could cure cancer with a simple injection, energy systems that could power entire cities without pollution, transportation that could move people across continents in minutes. "All of this could be yours," Quell explained. "All we ask in return is friendship and cooperation. Join the hegemony, and your species will never know want again." Most world leaders were overwhelmed with excitement. The Prime Minister of Britain called it the greatest opportunity in human history. The President of Brazil spoke of ending poverty forever. Even some military officials began talking about the benefits of advanced alien weapons technology. But not everyone was convinced. Admiral Chen had spent her career studying potential threats, and something about the aliens troubled her. Their ship was clearly designed for more than exploration. She could identify what looked like weapon systems hidden beneath the artistic exterior. Their offers seemed too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Dr. Webb had his own concerns. As a scientist, He was excited by the possibility of learning from an advanced civilization. But as he studied the hegemony's transmissions more carefully, he began to notice troubling gaps. "Where are the other species?" he asked his research team. "They show us these beautiful worlds, but we never see actual aliens from the 12-member species. Quell looks almost human, but where are the others?" His team worked around the clock, analyzing every transmission, every image, every piece of data the aliens provided. What they found was disturbing. "Look at this," said Dr. Lisa Park, Webb's chief assistant. She pointed to a series of images showing one of the hegemony worlds. "These cities are beautiful, but look at the people. They all dress the same. They all have the same expression. They move in perfect coordination, like they're following a script." Webb leaned closer to the screen. She was right. The beings in the images, supposedly one of the hegemony species, showed no individual personality, no variation in behavior. They looked happy, but it was a cold, empty happiness. "Run a comparative analysis," he ordered. "Compare these images to our own cities. Look for signs of individual expression, creativity, spontaneous behavior." The results were chilling. Human cities were chaotic, messy, full of individual variation. People dressed differently, moved differently, expressed different emotions. The alien cities looked like museums, beautiful, perfect, and completely lifeless. Meanwhile, Admiral Chen was conducting her own investigation. Using classified satellite networks, she had her people monitoring space around Earth for any signs of additional alien activity. "Admiral," reported Commander Torres from the Space Surveillance Network, "we're detecting some unusual readings at the edge of the solar system. Could be natural phenomena, but the patterns are too regular." "Show me," Chen ordered. The display showed several objects positioned at key points around the solar system. They were too far away for detailed scanning, but their positions were clearly strategic, perfect for controlling access to Earth's space. "Those aren't exploration vessels," Chen said grimly. "Those are defensive platforms. The question is, are they there to protect us or to trap us?" As the days passed, the pressure on Earth's governments to accept the hegemony's offer grew stronger. The aliens continued their demonstrations, offering solutions to every major problem humanity faced. Climate change could be reversed in months. Hunger could be eliminated worldwide. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia could be wiped out overnight. But they wanted an answer soon. "We understand your caution," Ambassador Quell explained during a global broadcast. "Change is always difficult, but we cannot maintain our ships in your system indefinitely. Our resources are needed elsewhere. We must have your decision within 30 days. The ultimatum sent shockwaves through Earth's leadership. Some saw it as reasonable. The aliens couldn't wait forever. Others saw it as pressure tactics designed to prevent careful consideration. President Vasquez found herself torn between hope and fear. The benefits the aliens offered were incredible, but Admiral Chen's warnings about the defensive platforms troubled her. Dr. Webb's analysis of the hegemony worlds was equally disturbing. "What if we're making a mistake either way?" she asked her inner circle during a late-night meeting. "What if we accept and lose our freedom? What if we refuse and miss the greatest opportunity in human history?" "There's a third option," Admiral Chen said quietly. "We stall for time while we learn more about them." "How do we do that?" "We accept their offer in principle, but ask for a longer transition period. We request more information about the integration process. We insist on visiting some of their worlds before making a final commitment." Dr. Webb nodded. "I could prepare a list of scientific questions that would require detailed answers. Buy us time to study them more carefully. But even as Earth's leaders planned their careful response, Dr. Webb's team made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden deep in the hegemony's own historical databases, which they had shared as proof of their peaceful intentions, were references to species that no longer existed. "Look at this entry," Dr. Park said, pointing to a section of alien text that their computers had translated. "It talks about the Corvani, apparently one of the original hegemony members. But here, 500 years later, there's no mention of them at all. It's like they disappeared. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. How many missing species can you find? The answer was devastating. Over the past 3,000 years, 17 different species had been mentioned in hegemony records, then gradually faded from all references. The official records showed only 12 member species, but the historical data suggested there had been many more. Where did they go? Webb wondered aloud. The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the alien databases, hidden among routine administrative files, they found references to integration protocols and population management procedures. My God, Webb whispered as he read the translated text. They don't integrate species, they absorb them. The ones who resist, they're eliminated. As Earth's 30-day deadline approached, the truth became clear. Dr. Webb's hands shook as he printed the final pages of his report. 3 weeks of around-the-clock analysis had revealed the horrifying truth about the galactic hegemony. He had asked his team to double-check everything, to look for alternative explanations, to find any reason to believe they were wrong. They weren't wrong. The pattern is consistent across all 17 disappeared species, he explained to the emergency session of world leaders. First contact, followed by a gradual integration period, then complete absorption into hegemony culture. Any species that showed significant resistance simply vanished from the records. President Vasquez looked around the room at the faces of prime ministers, presidents, and generals from around the world. Some looked terrified, others looked angry. A few still seemed hopeful that there might be some misunderstanding. "Are you certain about this interpretation?" asked the German chancellor. "Perhaps these species chose to blend completely with hegemony culture. Perhaps they evolved beyond the need for separate identity." Dr. Webb pulled up another set of documents on the main screen. "I found references to something called reduction protocols. The translated text describes systematic elimination of resistant populations, followed by relocation of survivors to work colonies. The survivors' children are raised in hegemony educational facilities where they learn to forget their original culture." The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. Outside, millions of people around the world still believed the aliens offered salvation from humanity's problems. The media continued to show the beautiful hegemony worlds and their promises of peace and prosperity. Admiral Chen stood up from her seat. "I have additional information that supports Dr. Webb's conclusions." She activated her own presentation. "Our deep space monitoring has identified 12 defensive platforms positioned around our solar system. These are not exploration ships or diplomatic vessels. They are weapons platforms, each carrying enough firepower to destroy a continent. Maybe they're for our protection," suggested the Japanese Prime Minister. "From what?" Chen replied. "They were in position before they even made contact with us. They're not protecting us from some external threat. They're making sure we can't escape." The Brazilian president leaned forward. "But the technology they're offering, we could solve climate change, end hunger, cure diseases. Even if there are risks, shouldn't we consider the benefits?" "At what cost?" Webb asked. "Based on their own records, integrated species lose their individual cultures, their freedom to make choices, their ability to innovate or create anything new. Yes, they eliminate poverty and disease, but they also eliminate everything that makes a species unique." President Vasquez rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of the impossible decision. "What about partial integration? Could we negotiate to keep some independence while still gaining access to their technology?" Admiral Chen shook her head. "I don't think that's an option. Look at their history. Every species that joined them completely disappeared as an independent entity within a few generations. This isn't a partnership they're offering. It's surrender with extra steps." As the debate continued, reports came in from around the world. The Chinese government had already voted to accept the hegemony's offer, believing the benefits outweighed the risks. Several European nations were leaning toward acceptance. The African Union was split, with some nations desperate for the promised technology to solve their economic problems. But other countries were reaching different conclusions. Russia's military leadership had come to the same conclusions as Admiral Chen about the defensive platforms. Israel's intelligence services had found additional evidence of the disappeared species in classified hegemony databases. Australia and Canada were demanding more time to study the offer. "We need to coordinate our response," President Vasquez said. "If some nations accept and others refuse, they'll divide us against each other." "It may be too late for that," reported Secretary of State Williams. "Ambassador Quell has requested separate meetings with each major nation. He's offering specific incentives to each government based on their individual needs." The divide-and-conquer strategy was already working. Nations struggling with poverty were offered immediate economic solutions. Countries facing military threats were promised advanced defensive technology. Governments dealing with environmental crises were shown miraculous restoration techniques. Meanwhile, Dr. Webb's team had made another disturbing discovery. Hidden in the deepest parts of the hegemony databases were personal logs from some of the disappeared species. The translation software had difficulty with the emotional content, but the meaning was clear. "These are diary entries from someone called Corvani Leader Thex," Webb explained to his core team. "Listen to this. Day 847 of integration. They have taken another 1,000 of our youth for education in their facilities. They promise the children will return as teachers for our people, but none have ever come back. The ones who resist are marked for population reduction protocols. We thought we were joining a galactic community. Instead, we are disappearing one generation at a time." Dr. Park looked up from her screen. "I found similar entries from 3 other species. They all tell the same story. Gradual absorption, separation of families, elimination of cultural practices, and finally, complete assimilation or death." Webb felt sick as he read more entries. The final log from Leader Thex was dated almost 200 years after first contact. "I am the last Corvani who remembers our songs. My children speak only hegemony languages and follow only hegemony customs. When I die, our species dies with me. If anyone finds this record, know that we chose to join them willingly. We thought we were saving our people. Instead, we destroyed them with our own hands." As Earth's deadline approached, the global situation became increasingly chaotic. Several nations had already sent formal acceptance letters to Ambassador Quell. Others were demanding more time. A few, led by the United States, Australia, and several smaller countries, were preparing to refuse the offer entirely. Ambassador Quell's response to the divided opinions was polite but firm. "We understand that change is difficult," he said, during a global broadcast. "However, we cannot allow partial integration. The hegemony functions as a unified whole. Either your species joins us completely, or you remain outside our community entirely." "What happens if we choose to remain outside?" asked President Vasquez during a secure video conference. Quell's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Species that choose isolation typically face many challenges. Without hegemony protection and guidance, they often struggle with internal conflicts, resource depletion, and technological stagnation. Few such species survive more than a few centuries. The threat was subtle but clear. Join us or face extinction through neglect and isolation. But Admiral Chen had been monitoring the alien defensive platforms, and she noticed something interesting. "Their positions have shifted," she reported to the president. "They're no longer in defensive positions around the solar system. They're moving into attack formations." Attack formations? Each platform is now positioned to target major population centers on Earth. If we refuse their offer, they won't just abandon us to struggle alone. They'll eliminate us as a potential threat. The final week before the deadline was chaos. Riots broke out in major cities as news of the aliens' true intentions leaked to the public. Some people demanded their governments accept the offer, believing survival was more important than freedom. Others called for resistance, declaring they would rather die free than live as slaves. World leaders found themselves making the most important decision in human history with incomplete information and no good options. Accept the offer and watch humanity slowly disappear over generations. Refuse the offer and face immediate destruction. President Vasquez called one final emergency session with the leaders of the major powers. The room was tense as representatives from around the world appeared on secure video links. "We need a unified answer," she said. "If we're divided, they'll destroy the ones who resist and absorb the ones who submit. Either way, we lose." "What are you proposing?" asked the British Prime Minister. "I'm proposing we tell them no." The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. Finally, the Russian president spoke. "You're talking about the extinction of our species." "No," Admiral Chen interjected. "We're talking about the choice between dying free or living as slaves. And there's something else you should know. We've been studying their technology, and it's not as advanced as they want us to believe. Their ships are impressive, but they rely on technologies we can understand and potentially counteract." "You think we can fight them?" asked the Chinese. "Premier, I think we can try," Chen replied. "We've been secretly analyzing their defensive platforms and their ship designs. They're advanced, but they're not invincible. More importantly, they're not expecting resistance. Their records show that no species has ever fought back effectively once they reached this stage." Dr. Webb cleared his throat. "There's something else. I've been studying the psychology of the hegemony species. They've been living in perfect peace for 3,000 years. They've eliminated conflict, competition, and struggle from their cultures. They may have advanced technology. The first strike came without warning. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, targeting military installations in 12 countries simultaneously. The Pentagon's underground bunkers shook as Admiral Chen watched satellite feeds of destruction raining from the sky. "Military bases in Colorado Springs, Norfolk, and Pearl Harbor are gone," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, his voice barely steady. "Similar attacks confirmed in Russia, China, and Britain. They're taking out our command structure first." President Vasquez, now operating from a mobile command center somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, appeared on the secure channel. "Status. Report, Admiral." "They're following standard military doctrine," Chen replied, studying the tactical displays. "Disable command and control, eliminate defensive capabilities, then demand surrender. The problem is, they're using 3,000-year-old doctrine. The hegemony's attack was methodical and overwhelming by their standards. 12 defense platforms, each with enough firepower to destroy a city, began systematically eliminating Earth's military infrastructure. Their weapons were precise and devastating. Energy beams that could vaporize a building without leaving radiation, gravity weapons that could crush a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. But something unexpected happened in the hours following the initial assault. Humanity didn't surrender. Instead, they adapted. Commander Sarah Mitchell watched from the bridge of the USS Columbia as the submarine rose from the depths of the Pacific. Around her, the crew worked with grim efficiency, preparing for an action that would have been considered impossible just days ago. "Target acquired," reported the sonar operator. "Alien platform bearing 270, range 40,000 meters, depth 200 meters above sea level." "That's not a depth, Peterson," Mitchell corrected. "That thing's floating in the air." "Yes, ma'am, floating target 40,000 meters out." The plan was insane, but it was the kind of insane that only humans would attempt. While the aliens focused on destroying fixed installations, they had ignored Earth's mobile assets. The Columbia, along with 3 other nuclear submarines, had been equipped with modified ballistic missiles in a desperate gambit. "Fire when ready," Mitchell ordered. The missile erupted from the submarine's launch tube and streaked toward the alien platform. It wasn't carrying a nuclear warhead. Early tests had shown that the alien's shields could deflect conventional nuclear explosions. Instead, it carried something much simpler and more effective. The warhead contained 2,000 pounds of depleted uranium rods accelerated to incredible speeds by a series of shaped charges. When it struck the alien platform's shields, the rods punched through like bullets through tissue paper. The platform exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "Target destroyed!" shouted Peterson. Similar scenes played out around the world as humanities. Military forces adapted to fighting an enemy they had never imagined. In Russia, MiG fighters modified with ramjet engines reached the edge of space to attack orbiting platforms with swarm tactics. In Israel, soldiers used modified Iron Dome systems to shoot down alien landing craft with concentrated bursts of conventional missiles. The aliens were learning that humans fought differently than anyone else they had encountered. High Commander Vorthak stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 3 of their defense platforms had been destroyed in the first 6 hours of combat. No species in their database had ever managed to destroy even one platform during initial integration protocols. "How is this possible?" he asked General Kryn. "Their weapons are primitive," Kryn replied, his reptilian features showing confusion. "Basic chemical rockets, kinetic projectiles, crude energy weapons. But they're using them in ways we haven't seen before." The display showed dozens of small human aircraft attacking one of their remaining platforms. Instead of approaching in formation like a civilized military force, they came from all directions at once, weaving between defensive fire, some of them deliberately ramming into the platform after their weapons were exhausted. "They're sacrificing themselves," observed Counselor Zephys, her tentacles writhing with distress. "Individual units are choosing certain death to damage our forces. Analyze their tactical patterns," Vorthak ordered. "There must be some logic to their approach." But there was no logic that the hegemony could understand. Human military doctrine was based on 3,000 years of fighting other humans. Creative, unpredictable, desperate humans who would try anything to win. They used deception, misdirection, and sacrifice in ways that the peaceful hegemony had never encountered. On Earth, the resistance was spreading beyond the military. In occupied cities where alien forces had landed, civilian populations began guerrilla campaigns that baffled the invaders. Dr. Webb found himself leading a group of scientists and university students through the ruins of Washington, D.C. They weren't soldiers, but they had something the aliens couldn't understand: an absolute refusal to accept defeat. "The landing craft are vulnerable when they're on the ground," he explained to his makeshift squad. "Their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles, but they're not expecting chemical explosives delivered by hand." The plan was suicide, but volunteers stepped forward anyway. Students who had been studying biology just weeks ago were now crawling through rubble to plant improvised bombs on alien vehicles. The psychological impact on the hegemony forces was devastating. They had expected organized resistance from military units, followed by gradual surrender as the futility of fighting became clear. Instead, they faced an enemy that seemed to grow more determined as the situation became more hopeless. But the turning point came from an unexpected source. Admiral Chen had been studying the aliens' attack patterns when she noticed something strange. "They're holding back," she told President Vasquez during a secure communication. "Holding back? They've destroyed half our military bases." "No, I mean they're not using their full capabilities. Look at these energy readings. Each platform is capable of much more destructive output than they're using, and they're being careful to avoid civilian casualties." Dr. Webb, monitoring the conversation from his position in the ruins, had a sudden realization. "They need us alive," he said. "Think about their integration process. They need populations to integrate, workers for their colonies, children to educate in their facilities. If they kill everyone, they gain nothing. So what are you saying? I'm saying they're trying to win a war while keeping their enemy alive and functional. That's almost impossible. Admiral Chen smiled grimly, and it gives us an advantage they don't expect. The new strategy was brutal in its simplicity. Instead of trying to defend fixed positions, human forces began attacking with no regard for their own survival. Kamikaze attacks became common. Soldiers would strap explosives to themselves and charge alien positions. Pilots would ram their aircraft into enemy ships after expending their ammunition. The psychological warfare was equally effective. Captured alien personnel were treated well, but constantly exposed to human culture, music, art, literature, and most importantly, human emotions. Some began showing signs of individual thinking that horrified their commanders. The breaking point came during the Battle of Luna City. Admiral Chen had assembled a fleet of modified civilian spacecraft, cargo haulers, mining ships, even luxury yachts equipped with improvised weapons. Their target was the massive Hegemony command ship in lunar orbit. "This is a one-way mission," she announced to the volunteer crews. "We're not coming back, but we're going to show these bastards that humans don't quit." The assault was chaotic, desperate, and completely contrary to every principle of military strategy the Hegemony understood. Small human ships attacked from every direction, some carrying nuclear weapons, others loaded with conventional explosives, a few simply planning to ram the alien vessel at maximum speed. The Hegemony defenses were designed to stop organized attacks by military formations. They were not prepared for 300 civilian spacecraft attacking simultaneously with no coordination except a shared determination to inflict maximum damage. Chen's own ship, a converted asteroid miner, broke through the defensive perimeter and crashed directly into the command ship's bridge. The explosion could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. High Commander Vorthak died in that explosion, along with most of the Hegemony's senior command staff. The remaining alien forces found themselves facing an impossible situation. Their enemy was willing to die to kill them, showed no interest in surrender, and seemed to fight more effectively as their situation became more desperate. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Hegemony began to consider the possibility of defeat, but the humans weren't finished. Reports were coming in from deep space monitoring stations. Other alien ships were approaching the solar system, reinforcements from the Hegemony's core worlds. "How many?" President Vasquez asked from her command bunker. "At least 50 ships," reported the tracking station. "Maybe more. They're coming from multiple jump points." Admiral Chen was dead, but her tactical doctrine lived on in the officers she had trained. The remaining human forces prepared for a final battle, knowing they were vastly outnumbered, but refusing to give up. They had learned something important in the past weeks of fighting. The Hegemony reinforcement fleet arrived expecting to find Earth in ruins and humanity begging for surrender. Instead, they found wreckage floating in Earth orbit and no response to their demands for status reports from the invasion force. General Kryn, now the senior commander after Vorthak's death, stared at the tactical displays in growing alarm. "Where is Defense Platform Alpha?" he demanded. "Destroyed, sir," reported his aide. "All 12 platforms are gone. The command ship Harmony's voice is also destroyed. We're detecting debris fields throughout the system." "Impossible. What about the integration forces?" "Scattered reports, sir. Many units are requesting immediate evacuation. The humans they're not behaving according to any known patterns." Kryn had commanded Hegemony forces for over 2 centuries, but he had never faced anything like this. The reports coming from the surface of Earth described warfare that violated every principle of civilized combat. Humans were fighting with captured alien weapons, using suicide tactics, and showing no interest in self-preservation. But something else was happening that disturbed him even more. Intercepted human communications suggested they were not just fighting defensively. They were planning to attack hegemony space. "Prepare the fleet for orbital bombardment," Kryn ordered. "If they won't surrender, we'll reduce their population to manageable levels and start over." It was then that the first intercepted transmission reached his ship. "This is Commander Lisa Park of the Earth Defense Force, broadcasting on all frequencies. We know you can hear this. We have a message for the galactic hegemony and all the species living under their control." Park was broadcasting from a hidden facility deep in the Colorado mountains. She had taken over Dr. Webb's research team after his death in the Washington, D.C. resistance, and she had made a discovery that changed everything. "We've broken your communication codes," she continued. "We've accessed your historical databases. We know about the Corvani, the Nexari, the Vorthan, and all the other species you claim never existed. We know about the work colonies, the re-education facilities, and the population reduction protocols." General Kryn felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: fear. "More importantly," Park's voice continued, "we're broadcasting this message directly to your member worlds. Every species in hegemony space is hearing this right now. We're transmitting the complete historical records you tried to hide. Your own documents proving what really happened to the disappeared species. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the hegemony. On 12 different worlds, populations that had lived in peaceful ignorance for generations suddenly learned the truth about their empire. The Nereth discovered that their ancestors had been artists and philosophers before integration. The Malthan learned that their species had once been explorers who dreamed of reaching distant galaxies. Riots began within hours. On the industrial world of Kryn Prime, workers who had spent their lives manufacturing hegemony starships suddenly remembered that their species had once been proud warriors. They turned the factories into weapons production facilities and began building ships for themselves. The peaceful Zephys homeworld erupted in protests as the population learned that their ancestors had been forced to give up their children to hegemony education centers, where entire generations had been brainwashed into compliance. But the real shock came when Commander Park made her final announcement. "We're coming for you. Earth is building a fleet, and we're not going to stop with defending our own world. Every species that wants freedom will have it. Every population that wants to remember their real history will get the chance. The age of the hegemony is ending." General Kryn realized with growing horror that the humans meant exactly what they said. Intelligence reports were already coming in about massive construction projects on Earth. The humans were building warships using a combination of their own technology and captured hegemony equipment. They were also doing something unprecedented. They were building ships designed to carry other species. The first alien allies arrived at Earth just 2 months after the initial invasion. They came in small groups at first. A single Nereth transport ship carrying refugees who had escaped the riots on their home world. A Malthan research vessel whose crew had stolen their ship and fled toward the human system. Former hegemony citizens who had heard Park's broadcasts and decided to take the incredible risk of abandoning everything they knew to join the human resistance. Dr. Webb would have been fascinated by the irony. The hegemony's own communication network, designed to maintain perfect control over their member species, had become the tool of their destruction. Every world in their empire had heard the truth, and many were deciding they preferred freedom to security. The refugees brought valuable intelligence about hegemony weaknesses, but they also brought something more important: proof that humanity's example was spreading. Captain Maria Santos, one of Admiral Chen's former officers, now commanded the hastily constructed Earth Defense Fleet. She stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiance, watching as alien ships approached Earth not as conquerors, but as allies. "Status report," she ordered. 47 ships confirmed as friendly, reported her communications officer. Mix of Nereth, Malthan, and a few Zephys vessels. They're requesting permission to join our fleet. Granted. Signal them to take positions in Formation Charlie. The formation Santos had developed was typically human, chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly effective. Instead of the precise geometric patterns favored by hegemony fleets, the Earth Defense Force spread out in loose clusters that could converge quickly or scatter to avoid incoming fire. Meanwhile, the rebellion was spreading faster than the hegemony could contain it. Reports came in daily of new worlds declaring independence. The Corvani, who had been thought extinct, were revealed to have survived in hidden colonies throughout hegemony space. They emerged from centuries of hiding to reclaim their worlds. The Vorthan, supposedly integrated into hegemony society 2,000 years ago, turned out to have maintained their military traditions in secret. They launched coordinated strikes against hegemony installations across 3-star systems. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Commander Park had discovered something in the deepest levels of the hegemony databases: the location of the original hegemony, home world, and the truth about what the hegemony really was. The 12 founding species of the hegemony were actually the survivors of an even older empire that had collapsed under its own weight. They had created their system of forced integration not because they believed in peace, but because they were terrified of chaos. They had sacrificed freedom for security and then forced that choice on everyone else. "They're not conquerors," Park explained to the assembled fleet commanders. "They're the ultimate victims of their own system. They're so afraid of conflict that they've forgotten how to live." The final battle came sooner than anyone expected. General Kryn, desperate to restore hegemony control, assembled the largest fleet in their history, over 300 ships carrying the combined military might of 12 worlds. They met the Human Alliance fleet in the debris field that had once been the outer defense perimeter of Earth's solar system. The battle that followed became known as the Liberation of Sol, though it was unlike any space battle in recorded history. The hegemony fleet approached in perfect formation, following tactics that had worked for 3 millennia. The Human Alliance scattered in all directions, using hit-and-run tactics that made no strategic sense but somehow worked perfectly. Human ships loaded with nuclear weapons rammed hegemony cruisers. Captured alien fighters flew alongside human fighters in formations that should have been impossible to coordinate. Refugee ships carrying former hegemony citizens provided intelligence and technical support that turned the tide of individual engagements. But the real victory came when General Kryn's own flagship was boarded by a mixed team of humans and liberated aliens. They didn't try to destroy the ship. Instead, they took control of its communication systems and broadcast a message to every hegemony ship in the fleet. The message was simple: you don't have to fight for them anymore. You can choose freedom. Over half the hegemony fleet surrendered without firing another shot. The war that followed lasted 3 years and spread across 50 star systems. It wasn't really one war, but dozens of simultaneous revolutions, with Earth serving as the coordination center for species that were rediscovering their own identities. The hegemony's response became increasingly desperate. They tried everything from biological weapons to attempts at negotiating separate peace treaties with individual rebellion groups. Nothing worked. The idea of freedom, once released, proved impossible to contain. The final surrender came not from the battlefield, but from the hegemony's own core worlds. Populations that had lived in perfect peace for millennia finally admitted that they preferred the uncertainty of freedom to the security of slavery. Commander Park, now Admiral Park, stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Earth, Station Alpha, watching as the last hegemony transport ships departed Earth orbit. They carried not prisoners, but volunteers, former hegemony officials who had requested asylum on Earth after their government collapsed.